and Assalamu alaikum to the issues with me, Harry Boota. I am joined today by Christian Wakeford, Member of Parliament for Bury South. We will be discussing the issues that affect Lancashire, especially Lancashire today, because of the COVID situation. As the whole world knows, the world is in a terrible state. It's causing havoc with economies around the world, and we want to find out from Christian how things are being affected by COVID in our areas. But let me first welcome Christian Wakeford MP to the issues. Welcome, Christian.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for having me.
Wa alaikum assalam, and thank you. I know it's precious, the time is, and for you to give us this time is very well appreciated. What's your background politically? Where did you come from? Were you born here, and how did you get involved in politics?
I'm an East Lancashire lad, born here in Burnley, went to school in Colne, in Pendle, and then educated in Lancaster, so very much a Lancastrian through and through. I got involved in politics and party politics back in 2003, actually, so 17 years now, which at the age of 35, quite a lot of, pretty much my entire adult life. So since then, I got more involved on the campaigning side, certainly when Andrew Stevenson was selected for the candidate here in Pendle. So I was joining him most weekends campaigning. When he was fortunate enough to be elected back in 2010, got more and more involved, and then became a councillor myself in 2013 for Lancashire County Council, where I got as far as becoming the chairman for Education Scrutiny. And then became a councillor on Pendle Borough Council as well in 2015, which prior to becoming an MP, I became the leader of a Conservative group here in Pendle back in 2019.
Christian, I wanted to ask you that on your biography, I was reading that you've studied at the Open University. Tell us a little bit about it. Tell us how many years did you do? What is it like? What's the education like via that? Or what is the Open University? Tell us.
The Open University essentially is a way to do degree courses, master's courses. I believe they even do PhD courses now remotely. So I think especially when more and more universities with students going back are focusing very heavily on remote learning, why not focus on the university that's actually been delivering it for decades? So for me, the Open University have not only been doing it, they've mastered it and have specialised for a long time. Okay. But I mean, for me, it was very much a case of I was 10 years ago, single, coming home from work and just getting bored. So I thought, why not do a chemistry degree?
Excellent.
So I did. And
you completed a full degree with the Open University?
Went through the whole thing. Took just over 6 years. Okay. Obviously from where I started to where I finished was a slightly different environment. We're being elected and then getting engaged and married in that time. So my time to spend on the course slowly dwindled, but it was a very informative time period.
There's another thing that I'm reading here on your bio, which is the International Parliamentary Network for Education. You're involved with that as well. What sort of countries does that reach?
It's very early in the day, so it was actually only formed a couple of weeks ago. So it's on the back of, obviously it's now the FCDO, but previously it was DFID, and their commitment to make sure that every girl across the globe had 12 years of quality education. I think, as we were saying before, education is so paramount in kind of levelling up in social mobility and making sure that everyone truly can achieve their fullest potential. So why shouldn't we be focusing on getting girls educated early on and to a high standard?
This program is going to be aired in Pakistan as well. So will the girls, the young girls, young boys in Pakistan, do you think they'll be able to benefit from this initiative as well?
I think the view is for it to make sure that people benefit from across the globe.
And is it
whether that's in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Africa, South America, no matter where you are in the world, we want to make sure your children are educated.
So it will go through DFID, will it?
Through the FCDO.
Okay, and which is what?
Obviously, it was DFID previously. The Foreign Office and DFID have now merged as of last month, actually.
Just for our viewers, FCDO is full name is?
The Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. You are on the Education Select Committee, and coronavirus is obviously very high, and it's affecting everybody. It's affecting economies. And you said you're on the since March you're on the Education Select Committee, and the impact of COVID on children, on education. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was very fortunate to be elected to the committee, certainly very early on in my parliamentary career. When we went into lockdown, we were then limited to what work we could do. We decided roughly what topics we wanted to look into prior to COVID, and we're slowly getting back to those now. But during the height of the pandemic, it was very much a case of carrying on our work remotely to see what impact COVID was having not just on children, but teenagers and the education sector very much across the board. So we were looking at those impacts, whether it was children from poorer backgrounds, were they able to access remote lessons, were they getting the support they needed. We were talking about mental health of not only teachers and teaching staff, but the children at school as well.
Do you think there is a disproportional bias towards people who are sort of less well off with COVID, as far as COVID is concerned?
I don't think there's a proportional bias, no. I think there have been particular issues. So there were some statistics that came out, and roughly 2.2 million children across the country had little or no education for the best part of 6 months. Now that, to me, it isn't right, it is an education tragedy. So it's what we can do now to mitigate that. So there was the catch-up premium introduced by the Department for Education and the government to try to mitigate some of that. Could we have done more? Yes. I think in an ideal world, we wouldn't have had some of the issues we've had during the summer. So in hindsight, we could well have sat exams. But I think we made a decision at the time which was right at the time. But obviously, hindsight is always 2020. But I think we've learned quite a few lessons, and we just need to make sure that we don't repeat some of those.
You say that we learn lessons, but what do we learn lessons at the expense of? In this case, it's children. Do you think that's fair?
Well, when I say we've learned lessons, what I'm saying is to avoid a repeat of what we saw early in the year with likes of the A-level results. So we know that children have to have an exam this year because it is the fairest way to judge them on their attainment. So there will be more work in regards to coursework. We will be making sure that exams do go ahead. And I believe we are looking at a way in factoring that in to allow more time for revision, but also to make sure that no child misses out because they might happen to suffer from COVID or need to be isolating. So actually, we are making it fairer this time. But we've only been able to do that because of the lessons we've learned. Going through where we were before, it was not, in hindsight, with the algorithm and everything, it wasn't right. But it's taken going through that to actually learn it, and I think we came to the right decision in the end. And I certainly told the ministers at the time, but we almost had to go through some of that pain to actually realise that.
I'm looking forward to the next pandemic, which is mental health, because what the restrictions that are doing, the liberties that are being taken away, eroded from the people because of the name of with COVID as the underlying issue. It's making, especially children's mental health is suffering because of all these restrictions and lockdowns. Do you think we're going to end up with a bigger pandemic of the mental health issues, or we're going to ride it?
I don't think it is the next pandemic. I think it's here already. When we're already seeing cases, and I go back to June before schools were first going back, and there was guidance as to what that would look like on the ground, but actually in practice it was very different. So actually just the pastoral care that children needed going back to school, it's great to be able to see your friends again, but when you can't really play, you can't socialise, you can't do anything, this is doing damage to our children. And I actually asked a question in the House of Commons this week regarding that, to see what we can be doing more to support our children and young people, especially in terms of their mental health. I mean, as a father myself, I'm worried about my own child's development. Being homeschooled for 3-4 months, it isn't good for anyone. So that's why it's so important for children to be in school.
We know that it's going to come, and so I think preparations. We should be preparing for this, and that should be the priority now. We're trying to save businesses, trying to save the hospitality sector, but we're not putting any funding in towards mental health for the elderly as well. I mean, the elderly are suffering just as much as the children are suffering.
I mean, the elderly absolutely are suffering in care homes. But that's why we need to be able to get back to at least window visits, if not full visits, as soon as is possible. Because it's not only the elderly, it's ultimately the rest of the family who suffer from not being able to see their loved ones. But there is millions of pounds going into mental health. We do need to make it more accessible, but what we do need to kind of factor in is some of the schemes we're actually looking at. So I know in Watford, my colleague Dean Russell is kind of recruiting an army of mental health first aiders. So he's aiming to recruit 1,000 within a year for people to actually start recognising some of the signs of mental health. So that we can actually start having some of these conversations early on, and the earlier we intervene, the less help that's needed. So I want to see a lot more done in schools, potentially even nurseries, so that we can nip this issue in the bud very early on.
Well, let's hope that we don't end up with something that we don't want. This could be the G5 of Corona with mental health that's coming up. We're going to take a short break now. I am speaking here with Christian Wakeford, MP for Bury South, and we'll be back right after a short break.
The issues of Kashmir have been eluding the world for a long time. I'm going to be bringing it out from the shadows. Why is the world ignoring Kashmir? And will the world continue to turn its back on two warring nations, both of which have nuclear capacity? And why hasn't the UN implemented its own resolution policy? And will it? And for all these questions, we will be digging for the answers to these tough questions. Please stay tuned for my new program, exclusive on Kashmir, The Pulse, with Kirsten Seymour. Watch for it.
Welcome back to The Issues. I am joined here today by Christian Wakeford, a Member of Parliament for Bury South. Kashmir is a big issue. There's human rights violations that are taking place. We've had debates on Kashmir taking place in 2017 and 2018 in the British Parliament as well. What are your views on what's taking place at the moment? The human rights violations are there for everybody to see. Can I just hear your views on it?
Well, I stood up in the centre of Bury probably just over a year ago now, saying how at a time when I believe we were roughly about 30 days into the occupation, that was, 29 days too many. One day was too many. The fact we're a year further down the line, with media blackouts still continuing, threats, abuse, murder, rape still continuing. that cannot be allowed to carry on.
But why is it being still, Christian, with all due respect, why is it still carrying on? Why, what does the international community have to do to take notice of what's going on in Kashmir? It is there for everybody to see. A member of Parliament, the British Parliament, has been turned away from the airport in India, and yet that's been sort of buried under the carpet as well, because she wanted to go and visit the occupied Kashmir and she's not allowed to. And she was the chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Kashmir as well. So it's a huge, huge blow. Something needs to be done. What can be done?
Well, I think really a lot of what can be done is making sure that parliamentarians like myself continue to raise the issue. So obviously we now have a Conservative caucus, if you will, for Conservative Friends of Kashmir, where parliamentarians are getting together. We are making sure that our voice is being heard, not only within the Conservative Party, but within government. But the UN need to ultimately change their view as well. When they keep on saying what's needed is a bilateral agreement between Pakistan and India regarding the issue, it's quite clear after 7 decades that there isn't going to be an agreement. So,
but that's a cop-out.
I completely agree. It is a cop-out. Yeah. But what we need to do is make sure that ultimately, that referendum that we've all been speaking about for decades is held so that the people of Kashmir can decide how they want to be governed. If that's by India, by Pakistan, or true independence for the people of Kashmir, or under their own rule, they have to have the right to decide, and they have my support in
Christian, that is not, in my opinion, right now, the burning focus is not the independence of Kashmir. The first and foremost, the issue that we have is of human rights. And Great Britain is a great champion. We say we're great champions of human rights, wherever they are in the world. And yet, it is this country that is turning a blind eye to those human rights that are taking place.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think we need to do far much more. However, we can't really be talking about human rights if we're not talking about their independence. If they don't have the right to self-determination, then they don't have human rights. So ultimately, that has to be the end goal. We all need to strive towards that. But we do need to make sure that the Modi government do stand up and listen. And actually, we are saying, enough is enough. You've raped, you've killed, you've murdered, you've abused far too many of our friends, brothers and sisters over there. So no more. And ultimately, we need to be doing that from a UK level, but from an international level as well.
So encouraging. I'm so glad that you said those words. But the only way people listen is, on countries especially, is for international action to be taken against them. There's some kind of a embargo for them to take notice. And yet, nothing has been done with India. There's continuously allowed. Now, should we do more? And how can we do more? Unless the Great Britain changes its foreign policy, which is like India and Pakistan, it's a problem between them, and we'll brush it under the carpet. We've got nothing to do with it. Unless the foreign policy changes, do you think that this government will not be able to do anything? Do you think?
At the moment, I think we have to push for that change in policy. So there's, like I said, a very good, strong cohort of us working on that behind the scenes, speaking to ministers, not only in the Foreign Office, but across government, to actually highlight the concerns that we're hearing from our Kashmiri constituents, to make sure that actually we are taking a wider view to tackle these human rights issues. Whether that gets to a point of imposing sanctions, those have to be on the table and truly considered, because it can't be right for a government to ultimately be killing people.
Prince William's and David Attenborough, they've launched a new initiative, a global initiative, which is called the Earthshot Prize. And this prize is apparently there to promote climate change and innovation into, revive our oceans, clean our air, protect and restore nature, build a waste-free world, and fix our climate. And this apparently this is a global prize, so anybody in the world, even viewers listening to our program there, they can take part of it. What do you think of this initiative, Christian?
Well, I've been a big fan of David Attenborough for many years, and I think when we first saw Blue Planet many years ago, I think that's when not only the country but the globe stood up and realised the extent of this issue. So I think we are now at a crossroads where we can start taking these issues much more seriously, or we are just adding to the issue of climate change, of the ecological disasters, and the plastic in our oceans killing our wildlife. I personally, I'm not a supporter of that. I want to make sure that the environment is there to be enjoyed by not only my daughter, but all future generations. So whether that's making sure we have clean oceans, with no more litter and plastic, the ecology and wildlife thriving, but ultimately our green spaces that are still there for everyone to enjoy.
But there are so many deniers of climate change out there. With the Prince now getting involved and with this kind of a high level of launch of the Earthshot, how can you persuade these climate change deniers that we are really in trouble?
I don't think we can, if I'm honest. I think if your head is in the sand to the extent you're denying climate change, despite the science clearly showing it is happening, but I don't think you're going to realise until your own home is caught up in bushfires or floods or earthquake or anything attributed to climate change. Unfortunately, I don't think we are there to persuade them. What we are there to do is to make sure that every other person across the globe plays their part in tackling some of these issues, because otherwise, we keep talking about 2050, and we may not even make it that far if we don't take serious change right now.
Right, Christian, you've got a very slim majority in Bury South, and so next year, or for the next parliamentary election, a lot of work to do. Are you confident you're going to retain the seat?
I think it's far too early to be talking about opinion polls or retention of seats for something that's 3.5 years away, and the entire national agenda could have changed. What we need to focus on is making sure that we get through COVID and we actually deliver on our pledges, whether that's the local issues that I campaigned on, so delivering a new school for Radcliffe, saving the Greenbelt from the Labour mayor and councils, or actually trying to make sure that our towns and high streets are actually thriving, as opposed to the empty shops and charity shops that unfortunately blight far too many of our northern towns. So I think really it is too soon to say. What you have to do is judge us on our action. Well, and hopefully by that point, you can see that there's a strong record of having a Conservative MP as opposed to a Labour MP, and therefore you can judge me on that.
Are you bringing investment into Bury South? Is it going to be thriving in the next? Would you actively bring investment into your area?
Conversations are going incredibly well. So I'm incredibly hopeful that certainly the towns of Radcliffe, for example, where my constituency office is, we are starting to see some change, and I do really think that there are opportunities out there for people to be seizing on. So hopefully we do get our new school for the town, and then we can focus on the rest of the town centre.
And what about the unemployment? The unemployment rate is going to be going up because of COVID, isn't it?
It is going up because of COVID, but again, the government are doing quite a few things by making sure that we are training up the rest of the country, really, to make sure that everyone has a basic standard of up to A-level qualification. Yes, that's not appropriate for everybody, so there are more things that I'm working on behind the scenes in terms of apprenticeships, reskilling, but also making sure that some of these sectors of the economy actually do survive. So we've spoken already today about the hospitality and the leisure and retail sectors. So we need to be doing much more to actually promote the good work they're doing, but to actually support them.
Do you have a vision of when the country could be going back to normal?
I would love to say so. Unfortunately, I think a lot of that is down to us as individuals to make sure that we are following the guide. And I know how difficult it is wearing a face mask, especially on the likes of a train. When I either have to take my glasses off and get a migraine when I'm trying to do work, or I'm constantly steaming up and having to wipe them. There is no easy way through this, but we get through this by working together. We get through this by following the guidance, and whether that's hands, face, space, the social distancing, and just realising that actually we all have a duty to play in this. It's not all down to government, it's down to us as individuals, so we all need to play our parts.
Do you think Christmas is cancelled?
Well, I'm a bit of a Scrooge myself, so I wouldn't fully be saying that. Christmas is clearly going to be very different, and my heart goes out to all my Muslim friends and my Jewish friends who weren't able to celebrate Passover, Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr because of lockdown restrictions. So my sympathies go out to everyone, but it has to be a fair deal for everyone. So I don't think it will be cancelled. It will be incredibly different, and we have to find a way to work around that. So I imagine it will be Christmas via Zoom in the Wakeford house.
Oh, Lord behold. Finally, what message would you like to give?
I think I'll be generous to myself and give me two messages.
Yeah, please do.
First one is thank you to everyone's support. Certainly in Bury South, in my constituency, but across the Northwest as a whole. But my parting message for everyone is, we will get through this. We do need to be strong for one another. If you can help someone out, please do. Please be generous. Show that caring, compassionate side that we all have within us, to make sure that we all get through this together and we are all stronger on the other side of it.
No, I see some. You're talking about the compassion side of things, and I hear that there is so much abuse that's taking place on social media. It's running riot with people's mental health, especially the social media side, and that's become a disease in itself. Do you think?
I think, unfortunately, it's far too easy to hide behind an anonymous profile and to troll people for many different reasons, whether it's race, religion, sexuality. There are so many kind of aspects that people are essentially bullied for online that need to stop. So again, there are some details of legislation coming through, whether it's the online harms bill or greater enforcement for police, etc. But ultimately, the social media platforms do need to step up to the plate. They need to take action. When we saw Wiley, for example, during the summer, going on a racist rant against the Jewish community, that wasn't right. But why single out any community? We need to make sure that there is no space for racism, not only on social media, but in society. And whilst that continues, I will be opposed to it.
They're thinking of banning social media for under 16s. I think, would you welcome that? So
no, I wouldn't. While social media causes a great deal of problems, especially for a politician, I do get abuse myself on social media. But it's also a powerful tool if it's used properly to communicate with people, to catch up with friends, relatives, loved ones who you might not see, especially now in this current climate. So I think providing it's used how it should be used properly, it should be stated.
But
it needs to get tighter.
Unless we have a social media, a global international police, which looks at, there are millions of people that are defrauded every single day through social media, and there are so many vulnerable people out there that are being defrauded and abused and all sorts via social media. Do you think we need a global police?
I think we need to be clear. It's not social media that's defrauding people. It's individuals. It's criminals that are defrauding people. So what we need to do is make sure that, one, social media companies have more power to actually remove these profiles quickly, but they need to be regulated properly in the first place as well. So that's why the likes of the online harms bill that I've been speaking about does bring in more powers for likes of Ofcom, etc., to actually make sure that they are controlling their content. So we do remove some of the fake news that we hear
Well,
pretty much on a daily basis.
By the time the profile's removed, the damage has been done. You know, they've taken the money and they've ran. They've closed the accounts down. They've taken the money out and they've gone. So that's where the problem is. That's where people are suffering.
Yeah, and I agree that there does need to be more work done. But in giving those social media platforms more control, so whether that's by and regulation by saying, right, well, in order to set up a profile, you need to provide, copy of ID or bank details, etc., to show that you actually are a real person. Then that that empowers the platform to take certain action at the right time, and that should hopefully mitigate any issues of fraud, criminal activity, trolling, bullying, or anything else, because ultimately you can't hide behind a fake profile anymore. So we do need to be doing more. That needs to be done on a global basis, but we should be leading from the front here in Britain.
Well, that's a great word to end on, that we should be doing more from here in Britain. That brings us to the end of this edition of The Issues. I've been joined by Member of Parliament from Bury South, Christian Wakeford. Thank you very much for joining me, Christian, and I hope it wasn't too taxing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so join us again next time on The Issues, and the world is full of issues, and as long as they're there, we'll be here. Thank you.